Good morning, namaste. I have a great deal of respect for the Eastern Orthodox tradition of Christianity. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it does have some very potent spiritual elements to it. And one is, it has a much stronger tradition of contemplation and meditation than the Western Church. And going back to the very earliest years of the Church in the East, there was the practice of meditation. And the kind of meditation, people couldn't call anything meditation. For instance, Catholics might refer to rosary as meditation, and to some degree it is, but you still have so many words that you're reciting. But the Eastern Christians did share this process of meditation that we find in Hinduism and Buddhism. And they will say, well, we were closer to where they were geographically, so there could be some cross-pollination there. And so they practiced a similar form to what we just did now, simply watching the breath. And they did what Hindus and Buddhists do, and when I teach meditation classes, I do the same thing, is I encourage people to use very simple words to correlate the inhalations and exhalations, right? So breathing in, inwardly saying peace, breathing out. If you're a Christian, you might want to say Christ. Or if you have no religion, you could breathe in saying one and breathe out saying two. But I think that using inspirational words, if you are of a spiritual nature, to use spiritual words of your tradition, which is one reason why I don't provide people Sanskrit mantras, because you might as well have something that's going to resonate with you. But the Eastern Eastern Christians, their mantra was to breathe in saying, Jesus Christ, Son of God. And to breathe out, have mercy on me. Breathing in, Jesus Christ, Son of God. Breathe out, have mercy on me. Now, that can be an effective way of meditation. However, think about what it is that they are constantly repeating. They are constantly requesting mercy, indicating that they are constantly doing something wrong. And guess what bright idea somebody came up with a few centuries later? Somebody thought, yeah, this is okay, but let's really take it a step further. And they added the phrase, a sinner. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Just in case you're not getting it, God, I'm really laying it on the line. I'm a screw-up. With every breath I take, I affirm my brokenness. And I'm hoping you'll let it go. You will be merciful to me. And again, as much as I really do respect the Eastern Christian Church, it has many beautiful ceremonies and rituals, and they are also a very icon-rich tradition, as we are in Hinduism. They really enjoy having beautiful artwork and beautiful aspects of divinity artistically represented in their churches. That speaks to me. At the same time, I'm wondering, how do people proceed constantly affirming their brokenness? Now, I understand that, yes, people can be broken, but is isn't our job in life to reassemble, to heal? Do we have to wait until after we die for that blessed state? Why can't we get a sneak preview right now and institute it into our lives? That is the difference between the Enlightenment traditions and classical Western thought. That is the difference between your brand of following Jesus and the established Eastern tradition and the Western tradition as well. So when we come together and we actually want to talk about confidence, we want to talk about being bold in who we are, we really should focus on our strengths while acknowledging our inabilities as well. We can't live in a fantasy world, can we? If there are issues we need to work on, let us work on them. But let us affirm that we can be successful. You know, the very first part of the daily word is there may have been times in my past when I believe I had to hide myself or pretend to be someone that I wasn't just to feel accepted. And I thought of two things when I first read this. The first was my own experience. Growing up, I remember being 10, 11, 12 years old and wanting to fit in. And no matter what I did, I couldn't. I didn't go around depressed. I muddled through life. But I looked at the other, particularly the boys around me, and I realized I just wasn't like them. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I know that I played baseball and football, not in school or anything, but I played sports. I loved playing sports, but I didn't have the passion that my other friends had. And I realize now I was thinking thoughts that were way too deep. And many years later, I realized, of course I was different, because there was this spiritual being just waiting to burst out of the parameters that life put me in at that time. And now I'm very thankful for who I was back then, even though it was challenging at the time not to be exactly like all of the other kids on the block. And I wasn't shunned or anything. I did have good friends, but I wanted to be like the more popular. And I'm sure this is quite universal. I suspect that the people that I'm speaking to here and online, a lot of, that's kind of who I was too, because those are the kind of kids that grow up to be the kind of adults that we all are. That's my take. Another thing that I thought of is the tremendous challenge that so many of my Hindu friends of the younger generation, people who are now in their, say, 20s and 30s, had to go through. Not so much their parents. The first generation, Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, they come over and they're already young adults. They may be going to graduate school or they may already be in a profession. But they've reached a point in life where they kind of sort of know who they are, right? And they know they're coming to a country that has different customs, and they're able to navigate that pretty well. Most of the people I know of that generation, first generation immigrant Americans, Indian Americans, they fared pretty darn well. It's their children that had the issues. Can you imagine being born into either being brought over as an infant or being born here with parents that had customs completely different from everybody else in your school and in your neighborhood? There's also the ethnic issue, right? You're about 4 shades darker than everybody else you know. When you bring your lunch to school, The kids can probably smell it a half a mile away. Okay. You have different holidays, and then, if you were around back in the 80s, all your friends go to see the Temple of Doom. What's the character's name? Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. We go, so that's your religion, huh? Oh, no, not quite. Why do you have all these gods with 6 or 8 arms, for goodness sakes? And of course, you can't answer because you don't know yourself. You just practice by osmosis. And I've spoken to so many of these young people, again, the people who are now 20 or 30, 35 years old. And the challenges were just amazing. And they tried so hard to fit in, to be their school self and their home self. And oftentimes the dichotomy was too much for them, and they fell into depression, and they felt so lonely. That line spoke to me, and how they had to work so hard, and they finally, many of them, the people I know, they did get to where they wanted to be. They are now very successful people. And now the kids coming up who are third generation Hindu Indian American or even Muslim Indian American, whatever, because there is such an encouragement in schools to embrace diversity. There's so many anti-bullying campaigns. They're actually having it much easier. So we are growing. But I wanted to dive deeper a little bit into the next section. It says, today I realize I don't need to conform to anyone's idea of who I should be because I know that I am divine. Being a child of God, I am everything I need to be. Easier said than done, isn't it? But that is what we should strive for. And I wanted to indicate just exactly how do we grow in our confidence. Yes, it's true. We can affirm this. I'm a child of God. I don't need to do anything other than what I am doing. Affirming that. But I think sometimes we need a little intellectual foundation. And then above and beyond intellectual foundation, a true experiential foundation in claiming who we are. That is to say, we can intellectually assent to, I'm a child of God. I can be confident in anything that I do. But if it doesn't resonate in here, then you have issues. Then you start second guessing yourself. Because we really have to feel, we have to know beyond a shadow of a doubt. And we start with affirming even though we may not have the evidence to back it up. But along with our spiritual practice, we come to the state where we don't even need to affirm. I don't have to affirm, I am Fred Stella. Because I know I'm Fred Stella. All right? If I have any doubts, I can look on my driver's license, my birth certificate, but I don't have any doubts. But in the beginning, when we want to take ourselves to the next level, we start with affirming and go beyond to knowing. Then we get to the stage of confidence, and we always, when we're striving for confidence, we're usually battling inferiority. Here's the catch. Confidence and inferiority are two sides of the same coin. They're not completely opposite. And oftentimes we are balancing one to the other. Because whether we are overly confident or whether we feel inferior, whether we do have significant doubts about ourselves, it is because at that point we are still experiencing ego consciousness. Now, the word ego, I've used it a number of times. I want to be very clear. I'm not using it in the Freudian sense. I'm not using it in the sense that most psychologists use the term ego. Ego, the Sanskrit parallel is ahankara, ahankara. Ahankara simply means that self that is not fully identified with the soul, not fully identified with God. So whether you experience, when you are experiencing some sense of inferiority, you are experiencing attachment to the small self, to that self that keeps you down. When someone is overly confident, when someone believes, I am the one who is doing all of this, I am the one who is the great musician or the great insurance salesman or whatever, that's attachment to this small s self. When we are attached to that small s self, we're extricating ourselves further and further from God, further and further from that divine self within, which is why it is so important, along with affirming everything else that we believe will give us confidence, will allow us to feel that we fit where we are, no matter who we are, is to constantly look at the divine as the doer, to give everything to God. Know that our talents come from God. That now, and there's always something else, right? Nothing is ever simple. For instance, we said a prayer today. One of the traditions, I think most of you know, that the team who is in charge of putting everything together, every Sunday at 10 o'clock, we gather and we have a prayer. And I mentioned something today about we're all using our God-given talents. The musicians, the tech people, ushers, and anybody who's in charge of making this happen today. We're using God-given talents. But I also said the talents that we've been blessed with and we have honed, meaning that it's pretty rare that God just dumps a basket of talent on someone and they become masters of whatever field they're in. It doesn't work that way. We know we have to hone personally. We have to practice. We have to continually learn to better our craft. So it's okay when somebody acknowledges you've done a good job at whatever it is you're doing. If somebody wants to compliment Mark for his keyboard work, well, yeah, Mark has probably put a lifetime of practice in, not probably, he has. He's put a lifetime of practice in that craft. But again, while you can accept the compliment, inwardly give it to God because it was God who practiced through you. It is God who learns through you. And the more you can keep an impersonal approach without seeming impersonal to everybody else, because we all are persons, but to keep things as impersonal as possible, not to be attached to either compliments or criticism. We have a chant in our tradition. It's, "Oh, life is sweet and death a dream when thy song flows through me." Okay, when we become the vessel, using the image of a musical instrument, when the song of the divine flows through us, life is sweet and death a dream, meaning that we can accept, we find joy in life and knowing that when we die, that's just part of the dream. Joy is sweet, sorrow a dream. To feel the sweetness of joy, but when times of sorrow come, acknowledge the dream nature not that it isn't real in the moment, but that it is ephemeral, that it will pass. And then one line, praise is sweet and blame a dream. So it's okay to feel that moment of joy, that glimmer of joy when one is praised, but to also accept that blame is part of the program as well. Blame or criticism, constructive or not, and that we have to deal with it, and to deal with it in an unattached manner, as we are unattached to our dreams. Doesn't negate the relative reality of what's going on, but we know that it is impermanent, and that the only thing that exists after everything is gone is God, and we who will exist in God. So I'd like to end by just having us close our eyes and inwardly affirm that we are confident, and that the meaning of the word con means with, and fid, feed, where we get bona fides, where we get adeste fideles, O come all ye faithful, where we get fidelity, to be truthful, to be faithful with ourselves and with other people. So we are confident. We are faithful to ourselves, with others. We know that we are part of the divine scheme, and that any feeling of failure is dreamlike in that we are unattached to it, and that it will pass. And we also affirm that the divine will flow through us, and that we will feel the joys of success and happiness. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Peace, peace, peace.